Happy Halloween!
Yokio is a Netflix series about an aristocratic demon slayer named Kaz Khan.
Which explains part of the reason I choose this as something to review for Halloween. I mean, after all, demons are kind of spooky, I guess. I would tell you the other reason, but I'm not sure if you deserve to know.
Okay, Kami, the real reason is because of series creator Ezra Koenig.
Who probably doesn't sound like a very familiar name to the majority of you, but if you're a fucking hipster nerd like me, then you would know that Ezra Koenig is the lead singer of the band Vampire Weekend. And he also happens to have starred in a major Laser episode. Actually, why am I not reviewing that this Halloween? You know what? More pressing matters. I'll get to it later. So let's talk about the characters.
First, we have the aforementioned Kaz Khan, voiced by Jaden Smith, with a melancholy demeanor and an obsession with traditionalist elegance.
And this seems like about as good of a time as any to bring this up. Jaden's performance in this show is very wooden and lifeless. However, interesting note, I almost feel like they cast someone who would give a performance like that on purpose.
It perhaps leans a bit too far in the direction of bad acting for me, but the emotionally dead delivery actually does quite a bit to add to the character.
There's definitely times where I feel it works incredibly well, but there's plenty of other times where his inexperience in acting is blatantly obvious. Well, not so much inexperience at this point, his lack of skill. And considering the fact that he's working with names like Jude Law, Susan Sarandon, and Richard Schwartzman, yeah, it really detracts from the overall picture.
Oh, and speaking of Jude Law, here he is playing robot butler Charles.
I'm sorry, did you expect me to have something to say here? I think at this point we just need to get into the plot of the show itself. Let's start with the first episode, The Sea Beneath 14th Street.
It's good of the show itself to start with a bit of backstory on the world we're in by way of tourism video before we start, because it can be easy to get lost on why anything is anything here.
Let me give you the basic rundown. Yokio is basically New York, and in the 18th century, demons happened. So the mayor decided to invite some demon hunters, and their descendants, like Kaz Khan, for example, are now part of Yokio's high society.
They specifically give these descendants the title of Magistocrat,
which is actually pretty clever. That's pretty much all we need to know about the overall world, except for one thing that they never really explain.
See, throughout the series, one of the driving forces of the conflict is the Bachelor Board, which ranks the most eligible men in the city.
When, and I guess more importantly, why was this established? Kaz Khan, later in the series, states that this is sort of integrated into Yokio's overall culture. And I guess it's actually something to the message of the entire series that I feel the need to question the purpose of something like this. And possibly it serves as a commentary on society's obsession with celebrity. But you know what? I'll save the more, social message of the show for later. We've got way too much ground to cover.
Let's talk about the soundtrack instead.
Because the use of classical composition throughout the show really does add to the sense of elegance and high society that they're going for. And it's nice that they keep with an orchestral score most of the time and still manage to keep intensity in the more intense scenes, even using that score. I felt like I'd probably have more to say here because I'm the music nerd, but let's be honest, the score isn't exactly the main reason why people are talking about this show, now is it?
So the opening scene elaborates on Kaz's situation, pointing out his recent breakup with a girl named Kathy.
Which is why he doesn't really feel like doing anything. Okay, it makes perfect sense to be upset after a breakup, but this is 3 weeks later, and sure, you can't really put a timetable on emotional stability, but as we're going to see later in the episode, his emotional state goes to quite the extreme.
Also, ass shot.
I'm not sure why they put a random ass shot almost immediately after the opening in the first episode. Certainly is an artistic choice.
The first time we see the Bachelor Board is also our first glimpse at Kaz's rival, Arcangelo.
And I think the most interesting thing about this particular display is the fact that this is the only time we learn Arcangelo's last name, Corelli.
This happens to be the same last name as the mayor who brought Kaz's ancestors to Yokio in the first place.
Which creates a very interesting dynamic. See, throughout the series, Arcangelo tends to use terminology to refer to Kaz that's somewhat derogatory, calling him Neo-Riche and Rat Catcher. But, and it's implied that because he works for his money, that's the problem. And it's also implied that the term neo-riche implies new money, but one question I have is, why does Arcangelo have such a problem with rat catchers when, his ancestor is one of the people who brought rat catchers into the city in the first place? I mean, granted, there could be distance, and that could explain some of that, so fair enough. But again, why does he have such a problem with those duties, considering who he is, considering his family's responsible for them? Surely that heritage is important to Arcangelo as well. And I think it's interesting, because that kind of, raises some questions about the timetable a little bit, and then, you know what, let's just move on.
Why are you late? Don't you have a watch?
Who cares what time it is when the future's an interminable abyss of whackness?
Those words you just said.
Anyway, there's a lot of info in this scene that's actually relevant.
So first of all, what this does is give a partial answer to my question, namely the answer of EastEnders are cunts. It's not really enough of an answer for me, considering these guys aren't even really antagonists. And in fact, later on become protagonists. It's weird. But another thing that happens in this scene is that we are partially introduced to Helena St. Tessero.
She's a fashion blogger that gets possessed by a demon in this episode.
And this first episode is actually a turning point in Helena's character development. This incident will lead to her being an anti-capitalist shut-in of a character. Finally, we have this amazing moment right here.
I've lost my appetite.
Moving on from the memes, we have Kaz shopping for suits by Touch.
No, I said moving on from the memes.
After blasting Arcangelo through a series of walls with his lightning powers, Kaz goes to do the exorcisms.
He fails. He fucking fails.
Well, okay, he basically tries smooth-talking her and nothing else before just kind of giving up.
What a fucking lazy asshole.
Shall we get you a giant Toblerone?
Is that why I have this triangular piece of shit?
No, Charles. I want to visit the grave.
Oh, well, this is an interesting development. I mean, we know Kathy didn't die, so, maybe we have a reason for this interminable abyss of whackness shit.
Maybe it's a family member? Ooh, maybe it's his first girlfriend. Oh, you know what? I bet it's...
You've designed yourself a beautiful grave, sir.
Oh. Yeah, no, this is where we're at right now.
I'm gonna rest for a bit.
Yeah, remember what I was saying about how Kaz's depressed state was a bit extreme? This is what I was talking about.
And you know what? It actually creates an element of comedy. Seriously, his melancholy is a full-on parody of Shinji Ikari from Neon Genesis Evangelion.
But enough about that shit. We have a very important conversation about what perfume an old man should be spraying on his wife's grave.
At this point, I kinda stopped trying to take this show seriously. And then I realized that this conversation actually serves a multitude of purposes.
To sum it up, Kaz is kind of a pretentious dick and tells an old man to pick a better perfume for his dead fucking wife, and then realizes that Helena's suit is possessed.
It sounds like less of a stretch with the dialogue from the actual show, trust me. Anyway, back to Helena's.
There's a short action scene here where Kaz exercises the suit.
And I'd like to point out how much I like the animation in the action scenes.
Even the field hockey game is very well done, with everything being crisp, fluid, and maintaining a consistent art style throughout.
Oh, by the way, there's also this line.
Demon be gone from the Chanel suit. Coco Chanel, may her memory be blessed.
Yep.
Anyway, sexual tension, Kaz win the big game.
I've got way too much shit to cover, and I'm already at the length of a full fucking review at this point. Episode 2!